AI is going to change the game. It already is. I mean, as the IOC, we've already noticed, we've already looked into the future and built the Olympic AI agenda. Sport is in a very luxurious position with the fact that they've got really great IP. And if you're a fan, you're a fan. If you can bring brands and content and data into that mix, I think you've got a really great mix.
No, it's super interesting. And is that an idea that you wish more sports leaders would take seriously around that? Marketing is not necessarily needs to be viewed as a cost center. We can flip the script on that.
I just think the whole innovation side of things is really exciting. Is there a new model there for rights holders to invest in some of these startups? Because they spend a lot of money on marketing. Why don't you start investing in some of these startups?
Hello and welcome to the Sports Pundit Innovation Podcast, the show exclusively for the people shaping the future of sport. I first appeared on this podcast as a guest, and now I'm delighted to be returning to host my own show. Over this first 5-part series, I'll be diving in deeper with various innovators and discussing industry-shaping ideas to get you thinking. Today's episode of Sports Pundit Innovation Podcast, I'm joined by Jason Steele, a visionary strategist reshaping the way global sports approaches brand and audience growth, engagement, and commercialization through digital. Jason is currently the head of marketing strategy at the International Olympic Committee, where he has led and executed strategies relating to data and marketing technology, fan engagement, and digital experience, including the development of the fan data platform and engagement activations for the Olympic Games Paris 2024. With a career that spans creative agencies, media, and sports consultancy, Jason blends deep expertise across marketing and commercial disciplines for global brands, agencies, and sports rights holders. He knows how to build the right strategies, technologies, and operating models that connect the dots between data-driven digital fan experiences and unlocking greater commercial value. In this episode, we unpack Jason's career journey and his thoughts on how sports rights holders and potential investors in sport need the correct approaches and levers to drive long-term brand growth. We'll go deep into his experience into growing, engaging, and commercializing audiences, with innovation at the heart, and balancing the art and the science, the brand and the data, the creativity and the technologies to create long-term value for sports brands. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Jason. Jason, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me. And big shout out to Andy Marston, because I used to work with him at CSM and a big fan of what he's trying to do with Sports Pundit. It's a great community. It's connected me with some really interesting people. So thank you.
We're really looking forward to diving into this with you today. And as you know, as a Sports Pundit community member, we always like to start with your journey. So really keen for you to take us back into the days. What has your path been? It's a really interesting one, varying kind of background and journey to get here. So really keen to dig into that.
Yeah, I was thinking back actually, and it made me realize that I'm getting quite old now. But I'll go back to kind of getting back first into sort of home entertainment stuff. I worked for PlayStation for a little while, predominantly on digital marketing, building product-based experiences for their product PSP. I don't know if you remember that product, but so we soon killed by the iPhone. And then I moved to a really interesting organization, a Finnish company who had one of their key products, which was Habbo Hotel, which is like a virtual environment for young people. And my role was to work with the media agencies to integrate their brands into the product experience. Also looked at all of the social media, when social media started being invented, how we build out our structures around social. I then moved actually into WPP and worked with the media agency that I was buying media off. And I went in there as a social director, and that was when social media was really taking off at that point. So we were building organic strategies for brands, international brands across all the platforms you would imagine. All the big platforms are bringing out their paid propositions. So they took me under the wing. I had a lot of free breakfasts and lunches at Google and Meta and places like that. And that was when programmatic media was coming into the industry as well. So it was really interesting to see how media buying was advancing. But I was always dealing with the asset after the creative process. And I really want you to understand more about the creative process. So I moved internally to Ogilvy and learned a lot about brand architecture, a lot more around sort of funnel-based marketing and content strategies, all that kind of stuff. Then I could piece together the full suite of how do you ideate, validate an idea through to developing the assets and then pushing them out through media. And then weirdly, I was on holiday and I bumped into an old school friend and they're like, we need people like you to come into our agency. And the agency was called JMI, Just Marketing International. It was a motorsport agency run by Zach Brown, who's now chief guy at McLaren, doing very well. And I went in there to do brand activation for the first time, but applying all of the things that I'd learned at WPP. And my first client was UBS, who had a partnership with Bernie Ecclestone in Formula One before Liberty, and with Mercedes AMG Petronas. And we did the full run activation, all the guest experience at track, working with high net worth individuals. But I was very much focused on the content side of things and developing content out of the assets and rights that UBS had bought through their partnerships. And then moved to more of a central role, looking at content a bit more, using rights and assets for many different brands in sports. But then JMI was merged with other agencies and created CSM, Sport and Entertainment, which is a global sports marketing agency. And within there, I did a lot of content-based stuff. I then did a lot of new business, but I was still not really happy with the digital proposition that we were pushing out for our brands. And so basically, brands will buy the rights and assets from the rights holder. Our job was to build marketing assets out of that and represent the brands in the right way. And coming from a world where we were doing big brand equity stuff and performance marketing, I felt like there was a bit missing. And I met a really great guy in the industry, a guy called Tom Huggins, who built an agency in Australia called Green on Digital. We got on the phone, we started chatting. We realized that they were the missing part of the puzzle, I think, for CSM, because it was a really novel approach on how you use digital and data to drive audiences through a funnel rather than just doing brand activation at the top of the funnel. And we rolled that out with a few clients, proved it out. I remember the penny drop moment was when we were working with a travel-based company and a Premier League football club. And we were able at the end of the campaign to attribute more than just media value. We could actually look at people that had gone to the website and the app to consume more content, more products and services, and then obviously go on to convert. So I could then start seeing really interesting developments around that. But then obviously the kind of issues with the rights holder, because they didn't really have the right strategies, they didn't really have the right technology or approaches or op model to support what we were doing in that space. So then we went and consulted a lot with rights holders and how you structure your data, how do you build the right MarTech, how do you build the right approaches around all of this to drive value for yourself as a brand through marketing, but also bringing your partners into that and driving value for your partners. So I did a lot of preaching with rights holders for quite a while. But then I really felt like, okay, I need to stop preaching. I need to actually go and practice this stuff and find an opportunity which enabled me to put all that into action. And then interestingly, the IOC, so the Olympics, spoke to them. And I didn't really want to move to Switzerland because I just bought my flat in London. I was like enjoying life. When someone like the Olympics gives you that opportunity, I couldn't say no. So obviously I asked a lot of questions before I went and realized that there was a good opportunity there and it operates at scale. It's one of the biggest and best brands that we all know and love. Made the jump across. I've been here in Switzerland now nearly 4 years. Focus very much on strategy development across digital, data, MarTech, fan engagement, creating really great fan experiences by creating that foundation, using our assets, creating new experiences and enhancing what we've already got, creating value propositions, and then how do we market those and commercialize those? And how do we innovate? And then obviously, how do we govern all that? Because obviously at the Olympics, you've got so many stakeholders. So I've been there 3.5 years, and I guess that's kind of my movement through the industry.
You speak about that penny drop moment where all of a sudden you could, you're sort of, if I'm paraphrasing correctly, measuring value just beyond, like, through the whole funnel, through the journey and all the way through. Was that the moment that kind of made you start to zoom out, I suppose, and really start thinking holistically around the sports future, right?
Yes, very much so. There's a couple of methodologies that I really like in the industry. The net and fields, long and short. I think that's the marketing industry telling the sports industry how to do their job better. And I think the sports industry need to listen to what you guys are saying. People like Mark Ritson. And since then, there's been other methodologies from, even a really nice paper around, which on the principles of the long and short, which looks at how you do big long-term brand equity based stuff, which is what I think sport did a lot of. But how do you combine that with more performance-based stuff where you need to segment audiences and deliver the right content or experiences, products, offers and services and all that kind of stuff to the audience at the right time on the right channel? And that's what data and marketing technology enables you to do, enables you to do both. Then it's like, how do then the sports industry then structure their rights and assets to complement that methodology and approach?
Yep.
Obviously, we proved out the performance piece at CSM. The brand equity piece was still there because brands were still doing a lot of content and purpose-driven stuff with their partnerships, which is great at a global level. But it gives you the flexibility when you can unlock that performance piece to do much more targeted things to drive different metrics and different value.
Yeah. And then, so you talk about the long and the short and the kind of mix of it. Were you seeing, especially in those early days, were you seeing that, it's obviously leaning one way or the other and there needs to be a mix, but you were seeing that it was either too short or too long and that was kind of what was happening? Is that sort of what you were seeing?
I think it was very skewed too long. And
Yeah,
I think you need to do the long. I think it's
of course.
60% on, 40% performance. But
Yeah,
if you just did the long, big brand equity storytelling stuff, it felt like you were only opening yourself up to speak to a certain number of brands. I think there are a number of brands out there that want to do that, obviously, but they want to drive result. They want to drive conversions from audiences. They want to drive products and service sales. They want to push offers, that kind of stuff. And that if you can activate digital audiences in those two ways, you open yourself up to more brands. I think
yeah,
on the B2B side, it's a different mentality. It's like kind of 95% brand equity and 45% performance, because the purchase journey and length to latency, people
yeah,
don't run in market all the time on the B2B side, whereas some of the more FMCG, fast moving goods are probably more geared towards, you need that brand equity piece running. And I think a lot of the assets, everything from, signage and brand exposure through to content creation and digital experiences work to a point, but then you have to look at all of your channels and your touch points and work out, okay, what touch points can we commercialize into nice inventory, which is actionable, and pushing the right content and experiences and offers. It's about creating the inventory that people can click on and interact with and drive audiences to your partners and start converting that way.
yep. And then just before we move on from that, because this is an innovation podcast and you're obviously very much a marketing expert and, all your experience speaks to this, can you just run us through a little bit deeper, I guess, the long and the short, and then I guess the performance versus maybe brand equity building? And I'm assuming long is that brand equity piece and short is obviously performance and what that means. And if I'm correct, the performance is really like when the consumer is ready to purchase, you're top of mind, you're getting them to buy that ticket in that moment. So if you can unpack that a little for us. And then my second part of this question would be, has that shifted over time or has that need shifted over time? Be interested to hear your thoughts.
People like to jump on the performance thing because it delivers tangible revenue.
Right.
If you just focused on the performance piece, then it doesn't work. And it's been proven out to work that way. So when you look at the long and short and also the multiplier effect, if you can imagine everyone's a potential buyer, there's a lot of people that are out of market and then they suddenly become in market. And it's then picking up those signals when they're in market to be able to deliver performance driven stuff to them, because the potential buyer should all be getting the big brand equity led stuff. But as soon as they start showing the right signals of intent, that's when you start needing to turn on the performance piece to obviously sell tickets, sell merch, whatever it might be that the sports organization's revenue streams would be. I think it's really important to be able to do both. I'm not sure at this moment in time what the relationship is between brand equity and performance in terms of investment. I think you probably should start 60-40 and then tweak as appropriate. But if you're a sports organization, especially if you're a club and you've got a brand and you're engaging a very tribal fan base, I think performance is always going to do very well because they're so passionate about the sports brand. I think sport is in a very luxurious position with the fact that they've got really great IP. And if you're a fan, you're a fan. If you can bring brands and content and data into that mix, I think you've got a really great mix of things to drive optimal performance. And we proved it out at CSM. You're looking at 2x, 3x performance if you can get all that right against what a normal brand could do. But as soon as you go into sports property and you're marketing to very passionate fan bases using content data and the right MarTech, performance can be a huge uplift across all marketing metrics, not just, exposure and engagement, but obviously further down the funnel.
Yep. And then has that shifted over time? Yeah.
That's a shift. When I was at CSM, I don't work for an agency and I'm not pitching for new business all the time, but the briefs were starting to change over my time at CSM. I was there for 6 years.
Right.
Especially in partnerships, it was always sort of top of funnel brand awareness and maybe a bit of engagement. But over time, brands were actually waking up to the power of partnerships, and I could see the objectives starting to shift. They wanted to capture more first-party data because they realized how important first-party data is. They were all threatened by third-party cookies being deprecated by Google. So everyone was like, "Give first-party data," because you can actually leverage a ton of great things out of first-party data. How do we mine our partnerships portfolios to extract first-party data? But then how do you then take that data and then use your rights and assets to go a step further and start delivering more meaningful metrics to partnerships. Obviously, media value is always going to be there because you do get value through media exposure. Then how do you complement that with more meaningful metrics, such as obviously engagement, clicks, conversions, and purchases and that kind of stuff? But then the rights holders have to react to that shift to do that full integrated marketing approach and be able to deliver that value.
Yeah, exactly. I think you've spoken about this before, that, there isn't just one playbook. It depends on you, your brand, I guess the power of that brand equity, how avid your fan base is, how tribal your fan base is. And no doubt now with the next sort of generations of sports fandom coming through, which are remote and quite different and show up in a different way, it's understandable that that's on the shift, I suppose.
So I think there's a lot of groundwork and foundational stuff that needs to happen. Rights holders essentially want to do, they kind of want to do three things. They kind of want to grow the audience, grow the brand, grow their first party data. They want to engage better, like meet fans where they are, create nice value propositions, and own the audience and create that one-to-one relationship through engagement. But then also it's the commercialization. So it's kind of grow, engage, and commercialize. And then commercialize can be fueling your direct consumer revenue streams, be that e-commerce or ticketing, whatever it might be, but also then how you activate those audiences digitally for your partners and other stakeholders for them to start seeing value from that audience as well. The grow, engage, commercialize thing is a big thing that I kind of work around when I'm building out strategies for the OC. But to get there, you have to unlock a number of different things, right? You need the right brand. You need to get the architect of your brand right. Like, why do you exist? What's your positioning? What's your pledge or promise to fans? And what's your playbook internally? So everyone is working towards representing the brand in the right way. I think you need good strategy. Obviously, you need an overarching digital strategy. There's a number of strategies that led up to that, such as, content strategies, channel strategies, data strategies, all of that stuff has to ladder up. And I think you need to get a hierarchy of strategies, right? Otherwise, you have silos building strategies, none of it. So it's like, none of it connects. And then obviously you need good data. You need to work out where the sources of that data is coming from. When you go on a website, you consent to cookies. You're an anonymous user because you don't really know who you are. But if you then see a value proposition and you sign up and you consent to marketing communications, you become known. You need to build data models around the anonymous and the known fan. You have to work very closely with your legal teams and data protection officers to make sure you're leveraging the right data. But then once you've got that data, you can create a ton of insights for sales teams to go and sell more partnerships, or content teams to create more X, Y, and Z, or marketing and media teams to make the right things and distribute the right things in the right way. But all that data needs to sit in a MarTech environment, which gives you that unified view of the fan. We look at people's demographics, their interests, their behaviors, and all their purchase history. And it creates that nice, rich picture around each fan. And you look at the data flows on how marketing teams can segment those audiences. Now they can then build those audiences and push them downstream to a channel, whether it's email, whether it's paid media, which you can then buy lookalikes off, which is really effective for us. Web and app personalization. We're also looking at data collaborations via clean rooms, where you can compliantly share first-party data with partners to drive more insights and more activation opportunities. So once you kind of got that data foundation with data and within the MarTech, and it's all doing the right things, you then need to look at all of your assets that you have as a rights holder to develop the right offerings and propositions for your fans. And that's not an easy thing to do. Because there's many different fans with many different interests and preferences. And there's different segments of fan as well. So how do you develop the right value propositions with the assets that you have, using some of the great innovations that are out in the marketplace to deliver a short form vertical video, whatever it might be? Or how do you build better content pipelines and use AI and all that new innovation to improve your products, improve your assets and your fan engagement and stuff? But how does that then leverage all the data foundations that you put in? How do you deliver more relevancy, more personalization through those experiences, leveraging the data and the MarTech that you put in? So then it's like you build the propositions and the offerings, then you got to work out how you market those to the segments to drive the reach, drive the engagement, get people signed up to acquire their data. And I wouldn't just acquire an email address. I'd try and get more data points on fans so you can retarget them better further down the line. And obviously, you might want to push people to a direct revenue stream. I mean, we support OCOGs, the organising committees, to sell tickets. We've got our own e-commerce store. Other rights holders might have more direct revenue commercial streams. Once you've kind of built that ecosystem, I guess, digital ecosystem, which is all connected, you then need to start looking at how you commercialize it. And obviously on third-party platforms, you can commercialize content through YouTube, for example. But on your first party, what inventory are you putting into those touch points to drive fans to a conversion point? Whether it might just be read some content, watch some content, look at this product and service from one of our partners, look at this offer from this partner. It's about understanding your audience, but then delivering the right experience, whether that is an experience from the brand or whether it's an experience from your brand partners, whether it's an offer or a product or service, whatever it is, you need inventory to be able to connect those brands into within the ecosystem. So the fan can then go and take an action. You might be driving them off your experience, but you're delivering value to the partner. So that's the commercial part. And then I think the final bit, just to close that off, is the fun bit, which is how do we all integrate within an operating model within the organization? Because a lot of rights holders are quite siloed. You've got content teams, data teams, marketing teams, legal teams, you name them. And they all don't, in my experience, they don't work very well together. But as soon as you invent digital fan experience, it becomes more matrix because everyone has to sit at the table because you have to be integrated and you have to govern this whole thing. All has to be governed and it all has to work together because integration, I think, drives 30% better outcomes. That's all challenge. But when you start building better data and better MarTech integrations, you start bringing teams naturally close together anyway. And I think a lot of rights holders need to get better at that, I think. But they're kind of the key things that I've been really looking at in the last 3.5 years at the IC. And, it is a bit of investment. It does take a bit of time. You're not going to see immediate returns. We're now starting to see really, really positive signs of returns around marketing KPIs, but also commercial KPIs, direct revenue KPIs, the things that we have thought about 2.5, 3 years ago. So I think sport is quite short term. I think the reason for that is a lot of these sports rights holders have got put a major event on every 2 weeks, right?
Yeah.
So they have the time to think 2-3 years ahead and invest in the right things, put the right solutions in and the right op models in and the right strategy to unlock that value maybe a bit later than next week.
Yeah, you raise a few good points, right? It importantly obviously starts with brand, which I think there will be rights holders out there that are so busy in this day to day, like I've got to put on a major event every 2 weeks. So that brand piece, I think, falls away a little bit. But also what you're talking about, like, don't imagine that was easy. You sort of say, the fun bit of connecting it all together. And this data and sort of MarTech, you work for the IOC, which is one of the biggest, arguably the biggest brands in sport, right? But where do you start, even if you're a slightly smaller or a rights holder within that elite perhaps, where do you start when mapping that fan data strategy that's on the shift, I suppose?
So I think there's a range of things that need to be done before you can really start commercializing the partnership piece, though. I think there's a lot of groundwork and foundational stuff that needs to happen. Rights holders essentially want to do, they kind of want to do 3 things.
And how do you best utilize data for marketing and these commercial activities? And you did touch on this, but I want to stay there for a little bit longer.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. It's one that we grappled with for a while. It's all based on use cases. What do we want to do as an organization to market to people better? How do we integrate partners and the wider Olympic movement into what we want to do? So it's all use case driven, and we would sit in a room with marketeers and be like, okay, what do you actually want to do? And what data points do you need to be able to do that? And then we would have to work with a range of stakeholders, which are data teams, which are creating those connections from all of the sources, such as e-commerce, ticketing, web and app behavioral stuff, all acquisition pipelines flooding in there. So then we've got about 12 data sources that we pull into our MarTech now. And then you've got the product teams, the marketing teams, the commercial teams. They all want to do something with that data. So it's like structuring the use cases. The use cases then inform the data points that you want to use. You then go to legal and say, we want to use these data points. Is it okay? We just use PII, which is email and phone numbers. And yeah, it's all based on use case. And then you've got 2 main things that you use data for. You use analytics and insights. So what are the metrics and the insights you need to make a decision, track performance, understand the audience better, what content they enjoying the most, what teams they support, what sports they like most. All that information we can get out of our MarTech to be able to inform sales teams, content teams, or whoever wants to leverage that insight to improve their workflows. But then it's the fan data piece. It's like building that golden record for fans and unifying all of those data points that are coming in around the user, whether you're anonymous or known. And then that data model is actually can then be enriched by some really interesting third-party sources, such as
Mhm.
Global Web Index, for example, where you can start bringing in third-party data to complement first-party, normally by market or by age group. And then you can start looking at affinities, propensities, and things like that.
Mm.
And then how do you then collaborate with partners with first-party? And then clean room solutions are obviously coming into the market. I think InfoSum, which I think are a fantastic product, have just been purchased by WPP. So WPP are onto something, and they obviously want to leverage that. But there's some really interesting clean room environments coming in, because wouldn't it be great if you could share data with your big broadcasters or your big partners and pull down more insights to improve your marketing activity and your commercial activity? So really powerful stuff. And I think rights holders have to move to a point where they're leveraging data as an asset and putting a value around that.
Yep. Super interesting. And you've spoken about rethinking, I guess, value creation in sport. And then obviously what we're talking about here is a single view of a customer. You've got, was it 12 data points kind of all coming into this kind of central location, all based off your use cases. And then coming into, and I've heard you talk about this before, customer lifetime value. And I think, what we see out there is that we're probably not good enough at this as an industry, funnily enough, right? We're talking about fandom, yet we don't really understand what that means. And so I'd be interested to get your perspective on what data really does matter when you're trying to measure that value, that lifetime value.
Yeah, I think once you've built the data model, it's available to be segmented. And what our technology enables us to do is, if you imagine like an and or not statement, it's kind of like, I want to understand, I want you to segment all the people that live in the UK and are interested in skateboarding, climbing, and BMX. And I also want to know people who bought tickets to Paris. And you can actually do and or, and that can either blow up the segment or really reduce it down to be quite a niche segment to market to. I think you can enrich with really interesting third-party sources, which we're starting to explore. I talked about clean rooms, but I think the golden metric we all want to get to is customer lifetime value or average revenue per user. ARPU is a similar one. And there's different ways to skin this one, I think. But you've all got to start somewhere. And we're starting to look at this now. And I think the metrics that can make up customer lifetime value can be based on digital engagement. So what are people looking at across your website, app, social, email, and push? Can you put a value next to those engagements? There's also the direct commercialization. So you can actually put $ based on what people are purchasing, whether that's tickets or merchandise. You may want to put a value on a particular market or demographic of fan. Maybe they're a younger fan base or an older fan base, or we're going to the US soon with obviously the Olympics in LA. Should we score those higher because they have more chance of buying a ticket? And there's obviously the guys that have been loyal and been with you for a while. Do you give them a score? So there's a number of inputs into that lifetime value methodology. And I think we're still trying to work it out now. And I think a lot of sports organizations are trying to work that out, because as soon as you get that lifetime value metric, it can really help you make strategic decisions on where you do your marketing, where you buy your media, and where you sell your product. So I think it's a really interesting, and a lot of MarTech can help you get there. You just need to code it all up the right way with that methodology.
Very cool. And then, this is, again, it's no doubt very, very chunky. When you're talking about your departments, right? So you're the one that's responsible for stitching this all together, but you've got your legal, you've got a lot of different departments here, your social, your marketing, no doubt, commercial. How do you mobilize these departments and teams to deliver that data-driven fan experience, right? So how do you then work with them in your role today to really get that to kind of work seamlessly across all these silos, if you will?
Yeah, just good governance and making sure you have the right FaceTime and meetings in the diary with the right people. Obviously, we have to bring the data and MarTech and marketing guys together quite closely, because every time you want to enhance the marketing technology, you have to bring all of those stakeholders together. When you want to build a marketing campaign, you have to bring product, content, and all those guys around that who leverage the data as well. So it's just good governance and making sure that you are structuring yourself as more of an integrated marketing agency, essentially. Because what we're trying to do within the IC, and I think with other rights holders, is we need to build that integrated marketing agency within the rights holder, because that's effectively what you're doing. Marketing is so specialized across all of these areas. You all need to be at the table in more of a matrix environment rather than a siloed set of departments, because you're all doing the same thing. We're trying to extract value out of the audience, and that's normally through insights and activation. It needs good representation from all the different teams. Otherwise, it's going to be completely disconnected. And then when you finally distribute those experiences, it's going to look disconnected. And experiences will turn up on the wrong channel, wrong time, to the wrong people, and you won't see the value. If you can't do stakeholder management, you're in trouble. You need to do it at scale at the IC because it's such a beast. But if you think about all of the stakeholders involved, we've got all of our marketing specialisms, you've got the commercial side of the organization, you've got 15 big global corporate partners, you've got over 45 international sports feds, you've got over 200 you've got all the media rights holders, got all the athletes. We want to generate value for all of those stakeholders, but it's like, but we're building the right data infrastructure. We now need to look at improving our experiences, and then how do we commercialize all those touch points and deliver more value to all those stakeholders from our digital ecosystem, essentially, because it's just the audience at the end of the day. They're your most prized asset. So build around the fan and build around the data.
Yeah, for sure. And then you have talked a bit about this experience design, right? So how do you really kind of end up doing, I mean, I've no doubt it comes back to data a lot, but, is there some art with the science, I guess, is probably the question. How do you end up designing experiences that truly matter to the fans? I think if everyone looks back at Paris, it was a phenomenal event, right? But I'd be really interested to see how you go about doing that. I imagine there's some art in that too.
Yeah, art and science do come together. It's really important, obviously. And you have to have very good insights and research processes. We're quite blessed. We have a very good research and insights team that provide us insights from a range of different areas, from focus groups with fans to more quantitative research. We get all the insights from our first party data within our MarTech. We've got all of our SEO machine going on there as well. Putting in all those insights are really important, but working with the end user. So working with all the different fan segments. What I think sport is sometimes a bit guilty of is executives in boardrooms coming up with ideas that they think will work, but they haven't really worked with the end user in the development of those. And I think you have to go through the insights phase, understand what you're trying to do. Then you go into some sort of ideation and concept development phase where you're working with the end users. How desirable is this? Do you want to do this? What do you need? What do you want? But also the rights holder has assets, but doesn't have all the assets. It has some assets, and then you have to build value propositions from those assets. So it's kind of like, we can provide you this. What do you need? And you kind of meet in the middle. Then I think once you've built those ideas and concepts, you then need to validate those through research. So you can then move through to the design and development of those. And then probably go to some sort of steering committee if it's in the IC to get budget approval and resource. And then you go into build, enhancement, and learns and optimize. And that's kind of the last phase. Because when you look at us as the Olympics during games time, we have some really fantastic value propositions, like all the results, medals, and schedules, which are updating in real time across loads of sports with different scoring systems. And there's a guy at the IEC, his work is weight in gold, but he mapped out to me once on a whiteboard how this works, and it absolutely blew me away. It's like looking into the matrix. But those kind of things, like for example, we have one of the best, I would say one of the most beautiful archives in sport, because we've got all of the stories from past games. How do we use AI and new technologies to tag up those moments, clip them, prepare them, and deliver, different experiences downstream, whether that's short form video, vertical video stuff, maybe it's clips that we push out to other parties and maybe streamers who want to do more of the long form stuff. Getting the right process in place, working with the end user, knowing the assets you have, using innovation and some of the really great technologies that are coming through in the sports tech space. How do you bring all that together to create really great ideas, which can then also be designed with commercial in mind as well? I think you have to always think about value that could achieve for a partner as well.
Yeah,
could they sponsor it? Could they integrate ad inventory into it? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And I mean, again, it's nothing short of a huge effort. Every time there's an experience put out the end, you realize the work that's gone into it.
There's some things that are kind of working and they can just be enhanced. There's new things you need to develop from scratch. But I think sports organizations need to look at what isn't delivering the value and what do we stop doing. Otherwise, keep building on top of all this stuff. Some of it isn't delivering value until you've done that proper audit of what you've got. And if it doesn't work, it's not delivering value, then why are you doing it?
Yeah. Now, really good segue from you in the past piece around AI, right? I think, this is obviously an innovation podcast, and we're living in the midst of what is this, massive piece of technology coming out. And I want to talk to you about the future of digital marketing, right? But what impact in your mind will AI have on this digital experience and indeed data-driven marketing? You're swimming in this lake of data that you have.
It's an interesting one. I was thinking back at all those innovations that come to market over my career, and it's like programmatic media, everyone thought they were going to be put out of jobs. It didn't happen. 3D TVs came and disappeared. Web3, I kind of liked where it was going, and I saw value in it. A lot of people jumped on it, and then it didn't really materialize. But I think AI is here to stay. Like, I've just been on holiday, and it was the first holiday that I've been on, which was purely generated by AI, because I just queried ChatGPT. I said, give me sun, give me hotels, give me restaurant, give me beaches. And I mostly said, don't give me British tourists. Well, I ended up in Turkey, and I didn't see one British tourist for 2 weeks.
And okay, ranking out of 10, how good was it as a tour guide?
It gave me 3 options, and then I went and spoke to a Turkish lady at work who said, you should go here, and I went there, and it was fantastic. AI is going to change the game. It already is. I mean, as the IEC, we've already noticed, we've already looked into the future and built the Olympic AI agenda. There's a lot of things happening around that. Obviously around, everything from talent identification through to sports integrity, such as judging and injury prevention. There's so much stuff on the sports side, I think, but I don't really want to.
Performance side.
But in terms of the digital side, it's a really interesting area to be, because obviously you've got generative AI, predictive AI, you've got recommendation systems for personalization, and a lot of the sports tech businesses such as, WSC, Storyteller, some of those really interesting new sports tech businesses are leveraging it a lot. I think AI is going to really affect discoverability. So some rights will be very reliant on search engine optimization. I think that will still continue. But when you look, I don't use Google much anymore. And even in Google, you're getting that AI kind of summary.
I actually I read a stat the other day, which actually blew my mind, which I think it might even be higher than this, but 60% of Google searches don't end in a page click anymore, which means they're getting their answer, right? So it is changing very, very fast. Yes.
I think it's changing very fast. Yeah, again, I think Google Analytics are now tweaking their back end. So you're still getting value from this. I think less people would. I think people will be clicking less to properties. So it's going to make it even more difficult for sports organizations who have their own and operated platforms to get people there. People just get the answer. Because there's 2 mindsets of people in my head. There's your intent-driven fan, which are people that just want answers to a question. And then there's the guys that are casually consuming in social because it aggregates all your interests into one place.
Yeah.
I doubt many people would go to a sports property to casually consume. I might be wrong. But it's like getting fan. I mean, people go to websites to find the answer to something. So if it intercepts them before they get there, that's a challenge. So if you typed in the sports properties URL and you went there, should the first experience just be an AI prompt to guide you to what you want to find the answer to? Because when you go to a website, you have to navigate through menus and all that stuff. Just to circuit break that with a very good GPT, LLM in the background. So we're looking at this kind of stuff because they can actually be commercialized. And it's a really great experience that you could put on your website or your app to guide people and be that support for them.
And it's interesting, right? Like you start to kind of go, like you go from this digital experience, which I know that you kind of go, well, it's just an experience. Most things are digital, but you think about that in the real world. It's like walking through the front door and being greeted by someone that's like, how can I help you today?
Yeah.
And we're probably going to move into that. Instead of sending me in through the door and I go, God, there's 4,000 aisles. I just don't know which way to go. Here's the menu and maybe I need to find out. And actually, maybe I'm out the store straight away. You do start to go, actually, it makes a whole lot of sense to do it this way,
Yeah, I mean, I go into big supermarkets and I can never find anything because I walk about 20 hours. If I could just say, where's this? It took me there, then happy there.
I shop online, so.
I do that too, but it's old school sometimes. But I think the AI is going to really help, not just the fan experience, but the workflows around producing those experiences. So like, how do you clip content at scale and deliver it in many different formats for different channels? I think that's going to be big, and media production is going to be big. Also, even on the MarTech stuff, we're seeing, working with Salesforce, they've gone big on AI with Agentforce. But the beauty of all this stuff is you've got tech businesses that have got really great products which we buy and use, but every year they have to develop something new to please their shareholders. And the technology advance is going so fast, we can't actually, as an organization, keep up with it because we're trying to sweat value out of the product we bought 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And AI adding on top of that. And it's like, how do you stay up to it? Because technological change will outpace organizational change so quickly. But even on the MarTech side, I've seen solutions that will look at your first party data, create segments, uses Gen AI to tell you how to engage with that segment. So it's actually really helping the marketeers do their jobs better and tell the marketeers how they should be marketed to, which is really, really clever stuff. And there's also synthetic data and all sorts of cool stuff coming via AI. So we've got a specialist team at the IC that are very focused on AI and contributing to that agenda. Because for us, it's the fan bit is kind of where I sit, but there's so much to do with the sports side of stuff. It's a big part, I think, of our future, and we have to embrace it, I think, because it's not going away, this one. It's not a 3D TV, this one.
No, not a 3D TV. And coming from the guy that sat through, the nexus of social content, all that kind of side of things, I think, that does, carry weight as well. And I totally agree.
I agree, but I look at the market and I'm like, will AI really take over the creator's role? And I've seen ads that are now being produced that are purely AI. And even with like all the misinformation that you see on X, for example, with what's going on in the world right now, it's like you see a video and you're like, is that real? I'm now seeing things. Annoyingly, when you work in marketing, you always look at the wrong things because I always look at the billboards when I'm watching football, or I'd always look at the content and be like, is that real?
Yeah, I think we're well and truly into the day and age where, we've always sort of known this, but what you see, you can't believe that, more so than ever, the cynic in me is probably dancing, right? Because I think you need to have an eye on things when you look at them and go, this is probably not real, which is, interesting and both scary, which brings us to, look, I've appreciated all this, what you've given us thus far. It's amazing insights, amazing career to date. And we are coming up to the time. So I want to bring it in. And what we kind of like to do is really kind of innovation podcast, right? Go forward looking. We already kind of have touched on this with AI, but just a few questions here. And, we've talked on obviously AI, but what excites you or worries you most about the sports industry and where it's heading? I'd love to unpack that from your point of view.
Yeah, there's a few things that worry me. And on holiday, I had the chance to read a very good book by Roger Mitchell, which is called Sport, The Perfect Storm. And it's like first of all, it's a financial masterclass. And I'm not a finance guy, but I kind of got to a point in the book where I was like, okay, I get it. But then some of it was like completely over my head. It was a SWOT analysis for the sports industry, and a lot of the strengths, opportunities, weaknesses, and threats were bubbling around in my head. But to see someone actually write this out was really, really, really refreshing. Like the commercial unsustainability of some sports, when you look at player wages, media rights reducing and fragmenting and, all that kind of stuff. We've got digital disruption happening all the time. We've got fragmentation of channels and content and all that sort of stuff. You've got the needs and wants of fans. So can working class people go to Premier League football clubs because they're being priced out? I mean, is there too much of a focus on the commercialization of it rather than the passion and the jeopardy of sport and all the fantastic things that come out of sport? And then as the younger generations, it's like we're seeing loads of new formats being set up, which are more creative led. And they're being done for a reason, because that's how younger generations want to engage. And there's the whole governance and institutional piece, which is these institutions and sports businesses particularly, I think, politics get in the way. There's vested interests, there's bureaucracy. They're not very quick at adapting to change, in my experience. I think that's starting to change though. I think the more investment companies that come into sport who want to see return on their investments will slowly start putting in the right people, the right strategies, the right technology, and the right operating models to start delivering value, especially through digital. I think media is media rights, and that's that. But you have to take a very structured approach to digital to start seeing value out of it. And I think the other things that kind of worry me a little bit, which is kind of what I kind of thought, but thank you, Roger, for really nailing that home. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. The value that obviously the data can create, like creating data as an asset, thinking more direct to consumer. So using some of the fantastic capabilities of MarTech to be able to engage right fans on the right channel at the right time. I think there's some fantastic assets that sports properties are sat on. How do you conceptualize those better, validate them, and use new innovations and technologies to provide really great cutting edge experiences which can be commercialized? I think there's some opportunities there. AI, like you mentioned, is going to improve the fan experience. It's going to help market jobs better. I think rights holders that really do care about engaging the youth will move more into the creator economy and more of the creator space. I think that's really exciting. So yeah, there's lots of cool things. I think obviously going on the fans are, there's all these new channels that keep popping up. I mean, we didn't have TikTok probably 5 years ago, and it's just
No.
like these things just spring out of nowhere. So it's how do you jump on those experiences, build your presence there, and then obviously you've got to work backwards in terms of how do you come up with the content to get those into the right places. And I just think the whole innovation side of things is really exciting. Is there a new model there for rights holders to invest in some of these startups? Because they spend a lot of money on marketing. Why don't you start investing in some of these startups? Because I think the innovation hubs that some of these rights holders are doing is a really good approach, because there could be one or two that come through the door and they create a better experience for fans, and they create a commercial opportunity for your partners. And you make money out of it because they grow with you. Incubating and working with innovative startups, I think, is a really interesting approach to that. And that's a new revenue stream for sports rights holders that always want a new revenue stream. So
Exactly.
I just think you got to think about value creation. And I'm not sure when an investment company are looking at a property, do they have the right structure and strategy and process ready to create value out of the brand? I mean, I've not worked for an investment company, but getting those
The one
things.
thing you haven't done.
No. I think there's value to add. I think digital, I think if you look at the industry, I think there's 70% of ad budgets are now digital. So why are these sports organizations not skewing it that way as well? But I think it's getting there. Every time I go to a sports conference, I go there and think, has this industry moved on a little bit? And it nudges along, but I'd like it to nudge along a bit more, because the last time it really nudged on a lot was when COVID happened. And a lot of revenue streams were dried up. Yeah, I don't want another pandemic to push the industry on. I think those that invest or want to invest in the right strategy, technology, and operating models will unlock the value. So
No, and I think that, the words of Roger and all the rest of it, we don't need a pandemic, but the platform is well burning, right? So there is this sort of shift in technology, digital, these next generations that make this perfect storm kind of all come together.
You look at Liberty, right? They took a motorsport, turned it into an entertainment brand, didn't see marketing as a cost center. And they built a range of different assets. They went out to Netflix. They really built that halo effect for their brand. And you look at their share price, it's like tripled in the 5-6 years since they've had it.
Yeah.
So not looking at marketing as a cost center, but one that can help generate and drive growth is important as well for rights holders.
No, it's super interesting. And is that an idea that you wish more sports leaders would take seriously around that? Marketing is not necessarily needs to be viewed as a cost center. We can flip the script on that and invert that effectively.
Yeah, I think if you obviously do the brand equity stuff, if you can get the right processes and technology in place for performance, and you can start doing attribution modeling and start seeing actual dollars coming in as a result of your activity, that is one way to prove out value quite quick within an organization. And then obviously, if you can activate audiences for your partners in the right way, your partners will less likely to churn, because they're seeing more value out of the partnership. Marketing, and especially digital marketing, because everything's trackable, measurable, is a lot easier to prove out than some of maybe the brand equity stuff. But I think they both need to work in unison.
Yeah, of course. And then, okay, thank you, Jason. Finally, to bring it home, I think people like yourself that are at the forefront, that are sort of paving the way, what's really interesting, and I often get asked this question too, is like, what are you reading? How do you stay abreast of what's coming next? What keeps you sharp, inspired, evolving? Yeah, if you'd like to wrap us up and share that with us, would be great.
Yeah, it's not easy to keep abreast of the industry that's moving so fast. There's some really good thought leaders in the industry that I follow quite closely. I mean, when I was at Ogilvy, I was exposed to Rory Sutherland and his behavioral science and his brain. You've got Mark Ritson from a brand and marketing point of view, and some of the methodologies around long and short and field. I think Scott Galloway is great for big picture stuff. Benedict Evans is a guy that I quite like to track and watch, because he produces really amazing presentations every year on the advancement. He's now focused very much on AI. On the measurement side, there's a guy called Avinash Kushik. He's really great. And there's a few podcasts out there like John Evans's Uncensored CMO podcast, because he speaks to all of these types of people. I do a Sunday walk normally, which is the podcast, and obviously just trying to stay abreast of things. I think LinkedIn's a great source, especially for the sports side, because I've got a nice network there now. I like to connect in with the sports startup scene because I just love to see new technology. And as soon as you see any technology, you can immediately think of the use cases that could leverage that and the value that I could then drive. Keeping abreast of that is great. New stuff comes out every year. Some of it will succeed, some of it won't. But yeah, it's quite difficult to stay on top of all of this as well as do your day job. But that's the fun thing of the fun thing of working digital. You don't do the same job every day. It evolves over time.
I love it. No, Jason, thank you so much. An absolute fountain of knowledge. I know our listeners will love this one just as much as I have. So thank you very much for joining us today and look forward to staying in touch.
No worries. And thanks very much for the time. And yeah, speak to you soon.
Wonderful. Awesome. Thanks for listening to the Sports Pundit Innovation Podcast. In the show notes, you'll find more info about today's guest and the topics covered. Visit sportspundit.co to find previous editions of the podcast, access the newsletter, sign up to our WhatsApp community, and join us at an upcoming social event in cities all around the world. See you again soon.